Hi, welcome to Your Health Today. It's the end of the year, and this is a really special show. I've been doing this show since 1996, and we have discussed every cancer that's conceivable at this point. My show today is different for two reasons. Number one, it's a part one and a part two. The second reason is because my guest, Dr. Joseph Bottino, is going to be talking about cancer, but how to prevent cancer, what's out there nowadays. Instead of talking about what to do when you have it, we're going to be talking about the things that you can do to hopefully minimize your risk of cancer and prevent it. So Joseph, thank you for coming. This is really a special show because, like I said, we're doing two shows, and every time we discuss things, it's always from the aspect of, all right, you have this, what do you do? And this is going to be really different. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. Hopefully we'll educate the people who are watching this.
We'll save some lives.
Right.
So tell me, what is out there? Tell me about how can I prevent cancer?
In order to prevent cancer, I think you have to have some understanding of why we get cancer to begin with and where it comes from. Cancer is not a random event. We know this from population data, from observing various individuals. So cancer doesn't just happen by chance. And there are people who we can identify that have higher risk of cancer than other people. There are people who have lower risks of cancer. How does cancer start? Cancer starts with a normal cell. A normal cell in some way has to be changed into a cell that becomes a cancer cell. The difference between a cancer cell and a normal cell is that cancer cells have two distinct properties that are different from normal cells. One property is that they tend to grow semi-independently of the environment, of the tissue organization. So your cells, as you're forming from the time of an embryo to a fetus, become highly organized, so you develop a liver, kidney, heart, brain, etc. And all of those tissues are highly organized and they interact and function well together. Cancer cells are disorganized tissues. They don't respond to the normal mechanisms that keeps cells together in a cohesive way so that they can be organized into ultimately what functions as your body. The other property that makes them different than normal cells is they're not sticky. Stickiness is important because, for example, your skin is a layer that protects the rest of what's inside in the body. And so all of those cells are sticking together. Cancer cells have this tendency not to be sticky to each other, and that gives them that property where they can break off, travel in the lymphatics or the bloodstreams, and spread to other parts of the body where they obviously don't belong. And that's why we talk about metastatic cancer. So cancer may start in the breast, but those unsticky cells have a tendency to break off, go into the bloodstream, and then spread to other parts of the body. It is believed that all cancers start from one cell, and then these cells gradually multiply. So the changes that cause cancer may affect multiple cells, but through process of selection, one cell develops all of the things that it needs to become a full-fledged cancer cell. And that process is called carcinogenesis. And what we would like to do in cancer prevention is that we would like to stop that process of carcinogenesis to prevent it from going forward. And even if it does go forward to various stages, to be able to detect even a formed cancer early before it has an opportunity to invade tissues and break off and spread into other places and eventually kill the person who has this particular problem. There are two theories about why cancers why normal cells become transformed into cancer cells. One is that something happens to the DNA of that cancer, the genetic information. It becomes transformed. So we know that radiation can do this, and various chemicals can do this. Viruses can get into the DNA and change the DNA information that's in a cell and transform it into a cancer cell. The other competing theory is that there's something wrong with the microenvironment or the environment in which that cell is sitting. So inflammatory process, these things can have the cell interact in such a way that its DNA gets changed, and ultimately it also becomes a cancer cell. So those are the two competing theories. Probably some cancers are formed by direct DNA damage, and other cancers are probably a result of DNA damage that's inflicted because of this abnormal micro environment. The idea that cancer is not a random event is an old idea. It's been around for hundreds of years. So it was noticed many years ago that, for example, nuns had a higher rate of breast cancer.
Right.
They had higher rates of uterine cancer. The chimney sweeps in old England, they had scrotal cancer. That was found to be related to the soot that they were exposed to.
Right. Japanese have higher rates of gastric cancer, lower rates of breast cancer.
Correct. The Japanese, it's believed to be due in part to the diet, at least. Eastern Europeans have high rates of gastric cancer as well. And of course, the number one cancer in the world, lung cancer, is clearly related to smoking. Right. So not every person who smokes gets lung cancer, but 90% of all lung cancers occur in people who smoke. And smoking is a devastating habit to acquire. 50% of people who smoke ultimately will die of some complication from smoking. And on the average, smokers live about 13 years less than people who don't smoke. So smoking is clearly one of those things that moves a person from getting cancer as just a random low occurring event to a very probable event.
And unfortunately, it's an incredibly hard habit to break.
It's very, very difficult. And it starts with believing that smoking is a problem. It's almost all methods that are used to have people, induce them to stop smoking or quit smoking, are equally effective. What actually determines whether or not a smoker will stop smoking is whether or not they've internalized this belief that smoking is actually bad for them.
Right.
If you don't believe that smoking is bad for you, you're never going to stop smoking, no matter what the Surgeon General tells you. So it doesn't really matter.
Especially since our president now smokes too. That's not such a great
on
message.
On the sly, I heard, right, it's not a good message. Actually, smoking started in the United States, or really became very, very popular because movie stars started smoking in the 20s and 30s, and they made it. They actually were responsible in many ways for making it popular. And smoke or tobacco is very calming, and so in the First World War, and I believe in the Second World War, the government actually gave out cigarettes to the GIs to keep them calm while they were taking fire. So that addicted a whole generation of Americans to smoking, and it's still a huge problem and needs to be addressed. And that actually leads me to some of the techniques for cancer prevention. Primary prevention is where we avoid the inducing agent or circumstances that cause it. So getting someone to stop smoking is called primary prevention. Secondary prevention is you've already been exposed or you've already had a cancer, and now we want to prevent another cancer from occurring. So that's secondary prevention after the fact. So there are two aspects to cancer prevention. It's believed about 1/3 of all cancers are a result of modifiable risk factors. So these are obesity, smoking, diet, level of activity. And it's intuitively obvious that a healthy lifestyle should promote less cancer. There was a very interesting study that was published from Germany last year, the Potsdam study. About 8,000 people or 9,000 people were enrolled in this study, and they got a simple score. They got a 1 if they didn't smoke, a 1 if they weren't fat, a 1 if they exercised more than 3.5 hours a week, and 1 if they had a healthy diet, lots of fruit, cereals, and vegetables, and low in meat. 9% of the German public had a perfect score of 4. 4% had a 0, and then everybody else fell in between. But the study was very remarkable because after 8 years of observation, the people who scored perfectly had about a 1/3 less incidence of cancer, and they had a very remarkable reduction in the incidence of chronic diseases, that is, heart attacks, stroke, diabetes. So very, very clearly, and this has been replicated in other studies in many places in the world, a healthy lifestyle is the first step to preventing not only cancer, but a whole variety of other diseases. One of the things about cancer that should be pointed out is about 7 million people a year die from cancer around the world. In developed countries, we have about 1/3 of that number. So most of the cancers, or 2/3 of the cancers that occur in developing or undeveloped countries. So the burden of cancer is not just in the Western world, in the United States and in Europe, but it's actually even higher in the undeveloped nations. And it's a result of poor diet, poor nutrition, sometimes lack of activity, excessive alcoholism, and various infections. 18% of cancers are now believed to be due to infectious causes. So that's human papillomavirus, H. pylori, which resides in the stomach. AIDS is a cancer cancer-associated virus, and the hepatitis viruses. Liver cancer is very common in other parts of the world, particularly in Asia, Southeast Asia, and China, etc. And we can prevent cancer by giving vaccines for these various viruses. Recently in the United States, the HPV vaccine was approved. It's believed that that vaccine can eliminate about 70% of cervical cancers worldwide. It was also approved now for use in boys.
Oh, really?
And in men, yes, because men obviously don't get cervical cancer because they lack that particular organ. But they do get penile cancer, and they do get head and neck cancer or throat cancer. And
secondary to the papillomavirus?
Secondary to the papillomavirus. And actually, the HPV virus, this does not necessarily implicate that there is oral genital sex. This can be transmitted by kissing, etc. So it's a very important virus. And this virus is also the one responsible for warts, particularly genital warts. So the vaccine also prevents warts, which can be an annoying clinical problem. China, a few years ago, instituted a